Good evening. This is Maestro Critello with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Leviathan Hive. Our first player today is Tex, the Legend, playing as the Plague Champion. The Plague Champion is a Chaos Marine dedicated to the God of Nurgle. Starts out with a damage over time bolter, but you can upgrade him to get some melee weapons. He can also heal, repair, and support vehicles. Alright. His opponent is NoisyElmo, playing as an Imperial Fist Force Commander. This is a tanky melee hero. He starts out with a bolt pistol and a chainsword, and he's got a wide variety of weapon upgrades. He uses a power fist to punch vehicles or a thunder hammer to disrupt a bunch of melee units. He's pretty tough, can tank a lot of damage, and also tie things up. Alright, so I've been focusing a lot on team games lately, and I've been doing that in part because it's just clearly what people want more. And I'd just say, like, for viewership purposes, it's usually more exciting to the majority of viewers. That being said, personally, there's nothing that excites me more than a high-level 1v1 between two of the best players in the, a long, good high-level 1v1 between two of the best players in the game, and that's exactly what we have right now. Now, interestingly, this game is one of a series of games from Tex's Plague Champion Diaries. He uploaded about 10 replays called the Plague Champion Diaries, just his attempts to play the Plague Champion, figure him out, make him work, and also just kind of maybe even find out any balance issues that may be occurring with him one way or the other. And he also made a thread recently, Tex made a thread about bottom-tier heroes. Heroes that you feel are basically just on the bottom end in terms of their performance in 1v1 games. And he put the Plague Champion on that list, and he actually, interestingly, put the Force Commander on that list, which came as a little bit of a surprise, but I'm going to trust him on that. But interesting things about the Plague Champion. The Plague Champion is certainly a hero that I feel can be very effective in team games. The Plague Champion is very good at making a defensive wall, especially if you have himself and Chaos Space Marines basically just making a ranged wall backed by heal worship. But that's something that's very specific to team games. Since in team games, there's not as much the issue of map control as there is, and you really have to force the issue of fighting more in team games. And that's definitely something that's very different about 1v1s compared to team games. In 1v1s, you have a lot more of the map control aspect. You can actually, matchups change based on the fact that you can avoid fighting to control the map. And again, that's something that really doesn't apply as much in team games, just because the size of the maps in team games don't really, the increase in the size of the maps don't really scale proportionally with the amount of units that there are, considering that there are more players. Team games, both 2v2 is much more crowded than 1v1, and then 3v3 is incredibly crowded. 3v3, it's almost impossible to play the map, well, not impossible, but just really you don't see as much of the map control game in 3v3 as you do in 1v1 or even in 2v2. You really just have to force the issue of fighting much more in team games. Whereas 1v1, you can really, if there's something you don't want to fight in 1v1, often you don't have to. You don't always have to force the issue, unless your opponent really forces the issue. And there are ways to force that issue, like probably the most obvious way to force an engagement on your opponent is when you start hitting their generators. And then they have to weigh the decision of, like, do they just let you destroy their generators? Do they commit to fighting you off, defending their generators? Or will they go for the counter bash? And it depends, because sometimes the better option is the counter bash than actually engaging. But say they're at your generators and you've just been forced off and you're in your base. In that case, pretty much your only choice is to try to force them off your generators. So one of the big weaknesses of the Plague Champion, like, he is good at creating that defensive wall, defensive range damage wall, which is very powerful in team games where, again, you have to force the issue much more. However, in 1v1, one of the weaknesses of the Plague Champion is that often, if you want to, you can just run away from the Plague Champion because of the relative lack of mobility of the Chaos Army. All Chaos units to start out they're just speed 5. The Plague Champion himself has lower than normal speed for whatever reason, And that's something I don't entirely understand, actually, and it's kind of something that is a weakness of the Plague Champion. The Plague Champion is slower than most other heroes, and he doesn't really have anything to compensate for the overall mobility of himself or the Chaos Army, whereas the other Chaos heroes do. And one of the things Tex said was he did say that something about just the way the Plague Champion is lacking does have to do with the internal balance of comparing him to the other Chaos heroes. And part of what that is that the other Chaos heroes have ways of compensating for the mobility of the Chaos Army. The Sorcerer does have his personal teleport, as well as the Sigil of the Rift, where he can teleport his other friendly units into other locations. So he has other ways, basically teleporting as a way of improving mobility. The Chaos Lord just, of course, has Corn Worship, which increases speed by 2, which is especially good for being aggressive. Now, the issue of mobility is both a question, or both an issue of map control, as well as an issue of how you win engagements. Because the Chaos Lord really has that ability to be aggressive, put on a lot of pressure, and kind of just really get into your lines, tie things up, prevent your ranged units from shooting, etc. So the Plague Champion in particular, because he doesn't have those tools that the Chaos Lord and that the Sorcerer have, he's a lot more vulnerable to things like snipers, to things like setup teams, and Tex says he often feels that he's forced into getting Raptors in Tier 1 as a way of basically, well, for all the things I just mentioned. Countering setup teams, countering snipers, improving mobility, allowing him to be aggressive and take the initiative, which is much harder. Again, harder for the Plague Champion than for the other Chaos heroes. So he's got his Raptors. Now, part of the issue that for going, there are actually a huge amount of issues for Tex going for the build that he has. First of all, he's got a huge Tier 1. It is massive in terms of the population, the upfront requisition required to purchase all of these units, as well as the upkeep involved. I mean, the upkeep involved, he's at plus 211 requisition. That's his current requisition income, in part because of the upkeep that he has with all of the units that he has. He's almost invariably going to get to Tier 2 late. He's only got a power income of plus 34. He doesn't have full generator farms, and well, he could put down some more generators. In fact, he should probably put down at least 1, if not 2. And it looks like he did exactly that. In fact, he put down a full power farm. And that's also going to make it a little harder for him to get to Tier 2 in a timely fashion. Actually, he might be okay, because he'll be getting the power income. And he's actually somehow freed up some he's gotten more requisition income because he captured one of his requisition points that had been decapped. But now, of course, first, just the issue with Tex's build, he's got an expensive build that's basically just going to kind of put him behind in terms of how far he can get to Tier 2. Maybe lucky for him, he's playing against Noisy, who is notorious for long Tier 1 builds himself. So he might actually get to Tier 2 on time. In fact, it actually looks like he might get to Tier 2 first. But then the bigger issue that Tex is going to have, that Noisy is definitely not going to have, is his vulnerability to vehicles. He really does not have much at all that he can use to help him deal with a vehicle once he gets to Tier 2. He's going to have a lot of trouble transitioning to Tier 2 in terms of dealing with vehicles, since he does not have any unit that can really upgrade to a real AV weapon in Tier 2. The closest things he has are if he gets a mark upgrade on the Chaos Space Marines. Either one would act as a very, very light vehicle counter. And then the Plague Champion himself, if he chooses to get the Plague Fist. But he's already committed to the Plague Sword, so I don't know if we're going to see him get the Plague Fist. Now, I've been talking a lot about Tex, and I've recently been accused of being biased. So, as far as what Noisy's got going on, he does have what's a pretty typical Tier 1 build for the Force Commander. He's got the Scout, Tac Scout, Tax and the Assault Marines, which is, I feel, a very typical build for Space Marines in general, very typical for the Force Commander, and in my opinion, very effective for him. He did also throw a Devastator on top, and, you know, I kind of like that. He's not spending a whole lot to get that Devastator out, and it'll offer him a lot in terms of suppression and control, and that's something I've already said that the Plague Champion could potentially struggle with, so I think that's a really good choice for him to throw on that Devastator on top of what he already has. And the map control is traded back and forth. Right now we do see Noisy definitely taking the advantage, and he's also keeping his... I like that he's keeping his Tactical Marines out, even at very low health, with the Flamer, because he can probably ensure the destruction of both of these generators. If Tex is able to force the issue against the Tax, or if he tries to, he'll probably get distracted or just tied up by the rest of Noisy's army. And Noisy was actually really able to keep Tex occupied with the rest of his stuff, but just by keeping the Force Commander in front as well as the Assault Marines. And he does retreat the Tactical Marines. They get out of there with 2 models and low health, but they were able to destroy pretty much they were literally able to destroy the entire power farm. So that ended up working out pretty well for Noisy. I was actually going to say, the Force Commander here, I actually think could have gone down. Now, Tex doesn't Doom Blast on retreat with Heretics, and I'm not sure why. It, of course, does cost models, but I think it's possible there that if he had Doom Blasted with both of his Heretics, Force Melee'd with the Chaos Space Marines, that he would have taken out the Force Commander, which is actually worth it in, of course, in 1v1. Now, Tex actually got to Tier 2 first. However, he did suffer the worst end of the Generator Bashes. And although he has more power in the bank, he's got a lower power income, so I don't know if he's in quite as good of a position. It looks like these Heretics do manage to get around the firing arc, so that is going to be a good situation for Tex. He might be able to return some of the Generator Bashes, and again, we see now we see Doom Blast, and he actually takes out 2 models from the Devastators, and I wonder if he had Doom Blast earlier. Ooh, Touch of Nurgle, very good timing. I think this is particularly good for Tex as a way of helping him take control so that he can return much of the Generator Bashes, and he was able to get 2 generators. Unfortunately there, maybe if he had an Aspiring Champion on this Heretic squad, it would have been able to stay in for even longer against many of these units, and he would have been able to get more of a Generator Bash off. Tex going for a Dreadnought. Now, I actually feel that's almost the obvious choice. Because he has invested so much in things that are not AV, getting the Dreadnought really seems like an obvious choice to me. It both forces the issue for Noisy to get AV, as well as acting as AV itself. And the Dreadnought just, it's very, very expensive, but although it's expensive, it is very good for the price. And I feel it's difficult to say whether it's necessarily the best of the Dreadnoughts, but it's definitely one of the more versatile Dreadnoughts, especially right out of the gate. Since right out of the gate, you're getting a Dreadnought that, of course, it's a vehicle, so it acts as that threat to your opponent where they need to get something to respond to that, and it has an AV weapon. Now, the autocannon, it's not a very good AV weapon. It's actually a better anti-infantry weapon than it is an AV weapon, but it's still an AV weapon nevertheless, and it's a ranged AV weapon, so you're immediately getting out both a vehicle and ranged AV in one unit. And that's actually very, very powerful. Things Tex is going to have to be scared about, or careful about. Although Noisy has committed to the Storm Shield, and I wouldn't be entirely surprised if we see Noisy commit to the Storm Shield and stick with it, Tex still needs to be very, very careful about a Power Fist purchase. Because even if he decides to switch to that and kind of lets the Storm Shield go, that Power Fist is just so effective against walkers that Tex really needs to be scared about it. Plague Champion might go down here. Shotgun's on retreat. Alright, I think he's actually going to get the Plague Champion out of there just barely alive. And again, Tex always seems to get his Plague Champion just out of there, or just his units in general. He seems to have such clutch retreats. There's so many times where, like, if it was anyone else, they would lose that squad. Double Khorne Space Marines, that's very, very interesting, but in some ways very, very smart. Now, Khorne Space Marines, if he can get a Melt-A-Gun, if he does decide to get a Melt-A-Gun on both of them with the Aspiring Champion, that does give him some soft AV from both of these squads, which is like not a bad choice. Especially he can put them in range stance. They can do soft AV either in melee or in range. In the case of the Dreadnought, he's better off in range stance unless the Dreadnought is specifically targeting something else. That being said, right now Tex can't afford aspiring champions. The disadvantage to him going for these Corn Space Marines is that at least when Battle Cry is active, they will very undoubtedly get countered by the Force Commander. He is also going to have to worry about shotgun purchases, but you know what? A touch of Nurgle is definitely going to give him the edge. I think even against shotgun scouts, it's going to give him the edge. Certainly against the single shotgun scout, I think it's going to give him the edge. Grenade goes in, but you know, even with the touch of Nurgle, that really helps out, and suddenly Tex is taking the advantage. Unfortunately, Tex is now in a very bad position with his Dreadnought in his own base against Noisy's Dreadnought. Now, Noisy could potentially lose his own Dreadnought, but chances are he will take out Tex's Chaos Dreadnought. Now, I think, well, Tex is actually deciding to move his Corn Marines into Noisy's power farm. Unfortunately, he's not doing anything with them. Now he starts moving them to destroy the generators. But yeah, he's definitely going to lose his own Dreadnought. He will definitely take out Noisy's Dreadnought as well. But it's a bit unfortunate that he lost his own Dreadnought, and that's a bit of an issue with getting those Chaos Dreadnoughts. Now, I said out of the gate, they're good because they do give you that versatility that many of the other Dreadnoughts don't. That they are both a vehicle, and they give you a ranged AV weapon right out of the gate. Whereas obviously for a Space Marine for other walkers, for either a Space Marine Dreadnought or a Wraithlord, you need to pay to get an AV weapon. But what those other walkers have is that once they get into melee with the Chaos Dreadnought, the Chaos Dreadnought is losing. And although you get that versatility out of the Chaos Dreadnought right out of the gate, usually you do want to upgrade the Chaos Dreadnought. Since you usually either want the harder ranged AV of the Tzeentch Dreadnought, or you want the Khorne Dreadnought, which will beat the other Dreadnoughts in melee. Whereas a vanilla Dreadnought, a vanilla Chaos Dreadnought, or a Tzeentch Dreadnought will definitely lose to pretty much any other walker in melee. Definitely lose to a Wraithlord, will lose to an upgraded Death Dread, will lose to a Space Marine Dreadnought, and will lose to a Blood Crusher under Worship. So the good thing though is if Tex had, well, you know, I was going to say that Tex would be in a bad position if he had taken out Noisy's Dreadnought, or Tex would be in a bad position if he had lost his Dreadnought but not taken out Noisy's Dreadnought. That being said, if he had lost his own Dreadnought and not taken out Noisy's Dreadnought, he probably would have lost the game just with that Dreadnought in his base. So the good news is that at least things kind of reset here, because again, Tex doesn't have the potential AV capabilities that Noisy has. Noisy, although he's committed to other weapons, he can still always get the Power Fist, he can still always get the Melt Bomb on his Assault Marines, and he can also get a Missile Launcher on the TAC Squad. And even though he's committed to other things, it's still cheaper to get those weapon upgrades than to get entirely new units out for the purposes of AV. And as it is, we have seen a weapon switch from the Force Commander. We've seen the Thunderhammer. And, you know, I also think that's interesting. Potentially there could have been some meta gameplay. I kind of hate saying that, but just, I don't know, just kind of some more advanced theories and stuff, which is Tex got both. He got both double Khorne Space Marines when he already had 2 double melee heretics, as well as getting a walker, and that kind of puts the pressure potentially that would definitely pressure Noisy into some kind of weapon switch for his Force Commander. But the question is which one, because for the walker he would want the Power Fist, but for the Khorne Space Marines and etc. he would want the Thunderhammer. But of course he can only have one at a time. And if he can like overload Noisy on things that he needs to counter, that can make it so that Noisy couldn't efficiently counter both. Like between the weapon upgrades, he couldn't efficiently counter both the Dreadnought and the double Khorne Space Marines and double Heretics. Luckily for Noisy, he already took out Tex's Dreadnought, so now he's just got the Thunderhammer that's just really going to do quite a number on both the melee Heretics as well as the Chaos Space Marines. Of course, with Battlecry active, the Force Commander will be able to, even if Tex decides to use Touch of Nurgle, if Noisy can use Battlecry, that can still probably pretty effectively counter the Touch of Nurgle Heretics. Although Noisy still says the Apothecary is better. And that was something that was even said by Tex himself, just that right now, at least in 1v1, the consensus that I've been getting so far is that the Tech Marine and the Apothecary are better than the Force Commander. Which is actually something that I heard a very long time ago, even when I first started playing Retribution. That was actually a time when people had said that the Force Commander was not that good of a hero. I don't know, maybe that was just my perception at the time of what people were saying. Could have been false. We're going to see a retreat here, but that's also a potential grenade opportunity. And, oh, that's going to be 2 models, I think. Oh, just 1 model. A little bit lucky, although. But I already saw just right as Tex was retreating. He may have wanted to try doing something like run those Chaos Space Marines close to the victory point and then retreat them for a better retreat path. But then he would have still been taking Vengeance rounds, full damage from the Vengeance rounds from the Stern Guard veterans. But Tex is definitely now suffering. He's definitely, although he made it to Tier 2 first, he's definitely now on the worst end of the economics at this point. In part because he's in a position where he's probably not going to make it to Tier 3. And when I say probably not going to make it to Tier 3, I mean he will probably not go to Tier 3 at all in the course of this game. And the reason he won't, he's suffering economically, he doesn't have a whole lot of resources in the bank, he also doesn't have a whole lot of power income, and he does have to worry about Noisy going to Tier 3, potentially getting out vehicles, and he's still going to need some kind of AV, because even if Tex tries to save up for Tier 3, he probably won't be able to get much in terms of... He probably won't even be able to actually get many Tier 3 units out. Oh, and Tex loses a Heretic squad. So the wiser decision will probably be for Tex to stay in Tier 2, and if he needs to deal with vehicles like Noisy's Tier 3 stuff, whether it's vehicles or Terminators, to probably stick with just with something in Tier 2. I mean, yeah, just something in Tier 2. So whether it's Plague Marines, another Dreadnought is risky. I'd say for vehicles, he's going to want possibly Plague Marines, maybe even a Las Cannon Havoc. A Dreadnought maybe, but I would say only if he already has the support of a Las Cannon Havoc or Plague Marines. And I'd also say if he wants to get a Dreadnought, he would also want to have, this time, he would want to have a Mark upgrade. But that's all going to be risky, because, or it's going to be tough to afford. Tex right now, it's going to be tough for, well, he almost has the resources for a Dreadnought, but again, at this point, a Dreadnought by itself without the support of either a Havoc or Plague Marines would definitely be in a lot of trouble against something like a Predator tank, which Noisy will also very soon have the resources for. Noisy, meanwhile, he'll have the... Terminators would probably be inadvisable against Tex's composition right now. Even melee Terminator, well, or especially, because if Tex gets the... Tex could get the Plague Fist, or the Plague Fist. And then the Plague Fist is... If he can stun the Terminators, if he has the backup from just all of his other units, especially the double Khorne Space Marines, that would be really, really dangerous for the Terminators. So a vehicle would be much, much better against Tex's composition, especially given the units that he's lost. And again, Tex himself, I've discussed this a bit with Tex. He also said it a bit himself in just in forum posts and stuff, which is that Chaos in general is not the strongest faction for dealing with vehicles. So the Plague Champion himself is going to struggle a bit with that as well. He's getting another Dreadnought. Again, not terribly surprising from what I said, although I personally... there are certainly problems with Plague Marines as well as a Havoc, which is that they're going to get disrupted, and they're going to get tied up by things like the Vanguard veterans or the Force Commander himself. Especially a Havoc, which, since it would have a las cannon, if he needed to deal with vehicles, would struggle with even just the range fire of things like the Stern Guard veterans. And now Noisy also knows that Tex has a Chaos Dreadnought. Oh, but we see another. Luckily, that touch of Nurgle is definitely bailing Tex out of a lot of situations. But we do have these fully infiltrated and fully upgraded scouts that are just, well, they're not infiltrated anymore. And the reason he got rid of the infiltration is that he wanted to make sure he wasn't draining his own energy that he could use for other things, such as grenades. I was actually expecting shotguns. I was more expecting shotguns so that he would have 2 shotgun blasts, so that even if Noisy tried to approach, he would just get knocked down twice. But certainly the grenades had bigger potential returns. But we're at the very end of the game, and this is actually a Terminator call-in, which I'm actually a little surprised to see, considering all the things I've just said. If Tex can just save up the power for a Plague Fist, he would actually be, well, not that he has a whole lot of time to save up, but if he can save up the power for a Plague Fist, he would be actually in a pretty strong position. And another thing that would also be very powerful is that if he can get his Heretics in the fight against the Terminators, with Touch of Nurgle, that would also synergize very well because it would allow him to heal the Khorne Chaos Space Marines. Now Tex is probably going to go for this decap over here. Now some of the difficulties with a lot of the theories and strategies that I'm saying is that they often require certain units to be together. Like ideally, if he wants to deal with the Terminators, he wants his Plague Champion together, he wants the Heretics, he wants both squads of Khorne Space Marines, and then you know what? He wants the Raptors too. And that's all of his units. Pretty much. We've also got the Khorne Dreadnought, of course. Oh, that Dreadnought, that generator explosion. But he needs those units separated to do other things. He's got the Plague Champion here, actually on map control. And now this Chaos Dreadnought is in quite a bit of trouble. Getting hit by Vengeance rounds. It's going to get out of the las cannon range. One more las cannon shot gets in, even when it was out of the range. And at this point, the Chaos Dreadnought is not going to live to survive the end of this game, as it is going right back into the las cannon range, and we've got Terminators here. But Tex may still take this game. He's got the double cap. He managed to chase off these back-capping scouts. I think he's either going to, he should go for this VP over here. If anything, I would say like, I was going to say have the Raptors jump up just to get it even quicker. Because at the moment, he's not going to be able to hold the bottom, but he's got a Plague Cloud. The Plague Cloud, you know, I think Noisy can definitely decap right through that Plague Cloud, and he might even be able to cap right through it as well, although he'll probably lose a model in the process. I don't think he's going to lose the entire squad. No. So the Plague Cloud, ooh, 1-to-1 cap. And we've got, do we have enough for a Touch of Nurgle right here? But you know what, even Tex definitely has enough for a Touch of Nurgle. But he needs something else here, because the Terminators could just get on the point and start capturing it and at least get the decap off, even while the Terminators are... But the Terminators are actually just committing... Well, now they're not. Now they're fighting. Tex really needs the support of something else here, because the Terminators, they could definitely get the decap off. They might even be able to get the full cap off, and soon Touch of Nurgle is going to run out. So that's going to be a problem. I don't know if Tex can fight off all of this. Certainly, the Khorne Chaos Space Marines are beastly, especially at level 3. As much as people also say they are underpowered, they really are pretty beastly. And the arguments for why Khorne Chaos Space Marines are underpowered are actually kind of legit. There are some very legitimate arguments to that. However, they're also still very beastly. Just in terms of their stats and how they actually perform, they are really beastly. A big part of the... Oh no! Orbital Bombardment. A big problem with the Khorne Chaos Space Marines is that the Chaos compositions, the Khorne upgrade is made exclusive with a ranged upgrade, which is the best ranged upgrade, the best ranged unit that Chaos has. And then they've already got too many melee units. But anyway, 1-to-1 cap. This is now not such a great situation for Tex. Lost his Raptors from that orbital bombardment. The Plague Champion trying to run over there. Oh man, if it was a sorcerer teleporting around. Alright, but Noisy gonna get this cap off right here. Vanguard Veterans, I think they can take the Plague Champion, and Tex is now splitting up his units. He's going to be able to get the decap off on the middle point. I think the Plague, well, the support of the Chaos Space Marines, the Khorne Chaos Space Marines, may be just what Tex needs right here. Even though the Khorne Chaos Space Marines are under strength, this could still be a winning engagement. Ooh, this is risky though. He's getting the decap off, but this means the Khorne Chaos Space Marines are going to get wiped. I was going to say they were going to lose. They were definitely going to lose without the Plague Champion support, and they got wiped. But Tex is at the point where he's just going all in, and which is kind of cool. He's just going all in, just going for everything. Touch of Nurgle might be on cooldown, so he might, if he had Touch of Nurgle right there, Tex might win this game anyway. Oh, 1-to-1 cap. This is not good for Tex. A late game Mucus Discharge or a Touch of Nurgle right here. But I'm guessing Touch of Nurgle was on cooldown, so he couldn't use it. And the Plague Marines... Oh, but the... Oh. So, you know what? I actually think Tex should have engaged... I think he should have committed to engaging the Vanguard Veterans while the Khorne Chaos Space Marines were still alive. I think with the zombies that he would have gotten from the Plague Champion, I think he would have at least forced off the Vanguard Veterans. But at this point, I don't. Tex still has the lead in VPs, but I don't know if he can actually take it. Khorne Chaos Space Marines might actually beat the Assault Terminators, but they're just going for the VP, which it's not entirely. The decision actually does make sense. Yeah, I don't think he actually had a choice. Oh, there's Touch of Nurgle, and again, it must have been on cooldown before. Now he's trying to commit to fighting, but yeah, I think that's actually just going to be it for Tex. All right, and Noisy takes it. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.